Will the Senate rebuke President Trump on Saudi Arabia?
Each week, The Score from Bearing Drift brings listeners news, reviews, and interviews.
To learn more, visit bearingdrift.com.
Hello and welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Adam Bearne. Joining us today are Stephenie Foster of Smash Strategies, conservative commentator Valerie Greenfeld, and Rachel Tripp of Young Voices. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this week, the US Senate is considering a resolution on withdrawing US support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. It comes in response to the Trump administration's handling of the Jamal Khashoggi murder investigation. So, Valerie Greenfeld, why does the US Senate not trust the Trump administration's policy in Saudi Arabia?
I don't think that's necessarily true at all. I think it's a very complicated issue. With the Kashoggi peace, in addition to the Yemenis war, there are many signals that the president does not want to send with regard to the war. We want to remain friends with Saudi Arabia, even though we can be critical about what happened with Kashoggi. Right now, Saudi Arabia is on our side, is on Israel's side, trying to create a coalition against Iran. And since Iran is helping Yemen, we want to make sure that those lines are clean, that we don't muddy the waters with regard to our support for Saudi Arabia.
Are we being critical enough with Saudi Arabia when it comes to Khashoggi?
I think Khashoggi, he was not an American citizen.
He's a U.S. resident, permanent resident.
He was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was friends with Osama bin Laden. This is not, your choir boy. This is somebody that, there were internal issues with MBS, I'm sure, but I don't know necessarily that that's our issue for us to decide what internally should happen in Saudi Arabia. I believe that our job is to walk the line, and I think that's what Trump is trying to do. And I think the Senate might be pushing a little bit too hard, but we'll see.
Okay, well, I might have missed the evidence linking Khashoggi to bin Laden, but the U.S. Senate, what do you think, Stephenie Foster, is driving this resolution there?
Well, I worked at the Senate, so it's interesting to me to sort of watch this process. And I think what you're seeing is that we're at a bridge too far for many senators, including people who have previously or have been and are supporters normally of the Trump administration. Lindsey Graham, Bob Corker, people who have been out there and have been supportive in general of what the Trump administration has done. I think this is saying, this is just too much. We need to take serious action against the Saudis, and I think this is one thing that the Senate is considering, whether or not to invoke the War Powers Act and to move forward. So that's one possible set of interventions, right, on our behalf, on behalf of the United States, to really send a strong signal to the Saudis. The Magnitsky sanctions, sanctioning people on the list, and making sure that they can't enter the United States, another thing to do. So I think right now what we're seeing is there's a lot of consternation in the U.S. Senate about what to do to really try to send the strongest possible signal of outrage about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and the fact that, from my personal opinion, and again, I wasn't there, but I think it was probably ordered by the Crown Prince. So this is a very difficult situation. I think the Senate is really trying to get answers. From what I know, they were upset that Gina Haspel, the CIA director, was not there to testify, even though she's listened to the tape and she's been to Turkey to really talk to officials. So I think there's a lot going on about the Senate exercising its privilege, but also being concerned that a lot is going on and that we need to take a strong stand.
Yeah, Rachel Tripp, why do you think that Gina Haspel, the CIA director, wasn't allowed to talk to or didn't talk to senators in this briefing?
I understand the senators' outrage around this. I feel like they feel as though that they have been not given access to a lot of critical information that would inform their decision. I think when it comes to whether or not she should have briefed them, I think that they should have been given access to that information. But obviously, from a Trump administration perspective, that would not have been helpful to their argument, right? And so I think that it was probably a move on the behalf of the executive to say, this is information that we want to command the narrative of and help push this resolution in the direction that we want it to go in. Was that necessarily the right way to approach it? No, I don't think so. I understand the senator's outrage, but I think that that was really what was underneath that.
Yeah, certainly some of the senators saying that it was coming from the White House, Haspel's lack of attendance at the briefing. But the Sanders-Lee resolution, which is what the Senate's discussing, is Bernie Sanders brought it up because of the war itself in Yemen that the Senate has never approved of American involvement in, and the fact that it's a humanitarian catastrophe which could lead to the starvation of millions of people. How important a role do you think that should play in this decision?
I think that it should play a larger role than it is. I believe that the senators' vote on whether or not to move forward with this resolution is really motivated by wanting to punish Trump for not giving them that access to information around the Kashoggi murder. I personally think that the United States' influence in that region is extremely important in terms of our own relationships with Saudi Arabia and also being able to make an influence in terms of how we can support Israel. But in terms of the effect that it should have, I think that most senators are thinking that they just want to punish the Trump administration instead of actually thinking about the war itself.
I agree with that, and I'm cautioned by that because U.S. foreign policy should not be made based on vendettas against the president. You know, these are very important decisions, and they affect millions of people, literally. When we talk about Saudi Arabia and all of the complications that are going on between the United States and Saudi Arabia relationship right now, I think that it would be too bad if the Senate went in and really messed up that relationship that we've been working so hard to progress with.
That is all for this week. I'm Adam Bearne. Thank you for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.